and he's served since the beginning. So we'll go ahead and get started when you're ready.
Okay, last time we talked about the budgeting process that we'd like to follow this year. I also went over some key actions and the major system areas needing improvement. I said that at this meeting today, I would talk next about the indicators of success, and then the next thing is the action plan. So here are the concerns, and we're going to work on them. How do we know when we're successful? Some people in business call those KPIs, and we're calling them indicators of success. And then the next step is, okay, if this is what success looks like, how are we going to get there? And we're doing that in a very purposeful way. Those plans are due to me by the team on November 20th, and then we will probably brief the board at the December meeting. It's important not to rush it, but also work with a sense of urgency, because if any of that is going to be included in the 2013-2014 action plan and budget, then we have to work this expeditiously. We have to work this expeditiously because we're going to draft the 2013-2014 action plan in January. We'll have time to review it with various partners, principals, this group, other groups, and then we're going to start prioritizing it and then tying money to it, to the priorities. When we do that process, we'll be looking at our Title I funds and Title II funds and see where we can work in reinforcing ways rather than having disparate budgets. So we were able to look at the indicators of success. The team is taking one last look at it. That's why it has draft on it, but for the most part we think these are pretty strong. These are drafts, so I would ask that you just keep them and not send them out until the team has had the final look at it. We'll be, oh, you didn't get, sorry. One more, two more?
I think that's it.
You got?
You got one?
One
more.
I have one.
Oh,
Thank you.
So what we have on the right hand side, and these you'll notice that on the left hand side we actually grew the system problems just a little bit to 33 instead of 32. Also on one of them we broke them down into 4 separate indicators, and that's on number 10 on page 3, or 4 separate issues, number 10 on page 3. That's the only difference on the left-hand column.
What was the 33rd, since I recognize what's numbered 33, so what
Right.
got inserted?
What we did, if you look at number 4 and 5, that used to be one item,
Okay.
So you split it.
and we split it into 2. And then, like I said, on the item number 10 now, establish an effective leveling process really has 4 bullets under it. The indicators of success we've worked on to try to have a timeline that makes sense, but also what success would look like for each of those areas. And all of them are measurable, so we can hold ourselves accountable to meeting those indicators. And then the biggest question, I think I said this last time then, is, okay, so what are we going to do? What are the action steps we're going to take in order to meet these indicators? And that's the work that's being done right now. So I'm not going to read the indicators, but I would ask you to take a look at them, and if anything, if you have a question about any of them, or even later on, if you take this home and you read it and you have a question, just give me a call or give Jim a call, and we'll try to get the answer to you. But I think the key thing there is to you know, if we don't put indicators and we don't have a good action, these problems are going to hang around for even longer, and many of them have been hanging around for quite some time. So we're committed to making sure that we hold ourselves accountable to resolving them and addressing them. Some you'll see it's going to take us a while to do. These are not easy tasks, and we've set an ambitious timeline. I mean, if you look at many of them, 2013, 2014, for major system areas that have been problematic for quite some time. And so we think we have a good start, because you can't fix a problem if you don't identify it and name it. And then the second thing is you can't have a focused plan if you don't have a picture of what success looks like. So it's kind of a little bit of backward planning.
My observation when I heard this presented at the board briefing was that something in 20 years of being involved in the district is that I think we're hesitant to seek best practices elsewhere, because we feel like we're large enough that maybe it's not, maybe something that works well in a smaller district or a neighboring district or a more affluent district doesn't apply to us, and I happen to disagree. So, and then I think we do some things well that we don't share with others, but I think I remember Trustee Morath saying we were going, later in the board briefing, they were going over curriculum and testing, and there were all these things that we were generating in-house, and the question was, you know, what are we already doing that we should be sharing with others? And then I think I wrote down the phrase share and compare. So how does that apply here in continuous improvement and so on?
That's a big part of it. We don't have to reinvent the wheel for everything, but there's some good practices that we aren't doing. I'll give you just a couple examples. So in the field lately, in the last several years, human capital management is being seen a little bit differently, and we're looking at it as more of a case manager situation, where we are actively engaged in schools to try to help them find candidates, rather than the principal finding the candidates themselves by going on Apple Track and looking for them and finding them. It's something that other school districts have used to great effect. Houston does a little bit of it. Charlotte-Mecklenburg does a little bit. Teach for America does a lot of it. And so those are practices we can steal from other people to use. Some of the technology systems, same thing. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. Oracle R12 is the system that Budget and Finance has adopted and is getting their processes online. We don't need to have a separate EPR system, a human capital management system, employee relations system. We can use Oracle 12 for that too. So it's those sorts of things we're looking at. Something that other districts have done on transportation. I mean, we have not been sharing where our kids live. That's not an innovative new idea. It's been around a long time. We just haven't done it for 10 years in the district. So let's do that. So Louisa, I think yes, where we can borrow from other folks and other systems that have done this well, let's do that. There are some other things that we might have to do, you know, in our own way because of special circumstances here. But I think a lot of it will be borrowing from best practices.
And then speaking to the financial side, and then anybody else feel free to ask questions. But we've seen as a commission last year the ERG analysis. I'm trying to think what the acronym stands for. But
Education Resource Group.
But how we compare and how we are financially structured to our peers, and we're outliers in several areas. How do you feel about that? And terms of comparing ourselves to a Richardson or an Austin or a Houston?
I think a couple things. I think we do need to continue to compare ourselves because you know, there's districts that are working well. I mean, Houston's further along in their reform efforts than we are, and they're working pretty well, and they're a large district. They've got a ways to go in some other areas, but there's nothing wrong with us, striving to be competitive in all those metrics. But the second thing is, and the board has asked for this pretty strongly over the last couple of years, and they want some KPIs. They want key performance indicators that are nationally normed. We can use some from the Council of Great City Schools KPIs, and we're doing that research now. Part of the system requirements is to come up with KPIs that are very strong and are nationally normed. We're also looking at service level agreements, many of which we'll borrow from TASB or other districts for our maintenance and operations. So I think norming with other districts is always important, just to see where we fall. So we'll be doing that. It's important, though, to get the right metrics for our situation. I'll give you one example, and I apologize. I don't mean to beat up any one section or any one group. I think when I mention transportation, I know some people might feel I'm beating up anybody. I'm not. We have to own transportation, even if it's Dallas County. When we get calls at the beginning of the year from parents who say their kid did not arrive at the stop, I feel it's just as much my job as it is Dallas County's job to fix that. I don't say, and we didn't say this year, that's somebody else's issue. It's our issue. So last year, you could choose a KPI, for example, where the indicator is how much does it cost you to transport a kid on average? What is your per pupil transportation cost? And if that's all you looked at as a KPI and you compared yourself with other districts, you could have a lower number per pupil operating cost for transportation than other districts and call yourself great and say, there you have it. That's a metric. We hit that metric and we're all happy. Well, that's a good thing, but let's also look at the quality of service. Because maybe, just possibly in some hypothetical district, this number could be really low, but the quality could be terrible, and that's not really serving kids well. So we have to look at good metrics and indicators. So comparison is important, but let's get the right comparisons that fit our circumstances.
Yeah, and then on that particular subject, we have a disparity in who receives services and who doesn't.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think we have to do better with that. So and I also don't want to. I mean, this is going to be tough work. So I'm not trying to lower expectations, but I do want to be careful and say, it's one thing to identify issues. It's a whole nother thing to try to solve them or address them in an urgent manner and in a way that we're going to produce some results pretty quickly. This is going to take a lot of work from a whole bunch of people, and we're committed to that. But we'll try to strike a balance with the timeline.
One area that I've had a question on, we talk a lot about college and career readiness. Schools, I see the counselors being overwhelmed, actually finding very little time available to actually do counseling by the time they do registration, getting students in their classes, getting them, all the test materials they need and all this and that. There's actually, for an individual student, almost no personalized attention. And so, we might do a good job academically, but what are your thoughts on what we need to do in the counseling area?
My initial thought, and I don't want to give any false expectations, but my initial thought is we don't have enough counselors. Not the caseload, the number of students per every counselor is too high. And you're right. I've talked to some of them, and they say they're overwhelmed with a lot of other things. We're going to be looking at that. In fact, I had a talk with assistant superintendents today. One of the things we're going to ask them to do this year before winter break is to come up with a proposed staffing model that makes sense and and we're going to analyze it to see what the cost is. So, for example, we might have to increase the number of counselors, or we might have to relieve them of some of the other things they're doing, and so that they prioritize their workload around college and career readiness. We might have to increase the number of assistant principals. If we're going to focus this much attention on instruction, we might have to do that. So they're going to be looking comprehensively at the classroom. Now, all of this, if you add anybody, costs money, right? So we're also looking at the number of teachers and professionals outside of the classroom in every building. We have about 1,100 teachers who are not in the classroom out of 10,000. So the question is, what are they doing? And if they're filling a need, that's great. But what are they doing? And do we need them as much as we need an additional counselor? Do we need them as much as we need an AP? So all that's being looked at so that we stay fiscally sound and not, decrease our fund balance.
So what would be the timetable for having a view on what that would look like for next year?
For staffing, I've asked for the draft by winter break. So by the time we go on Christmas break, by vacation, I will have drafts in my hand. And the reason why that's important is if we're going to do anything differently next year with regard to staffing and assignments, first of all, we have to pass that by the board. But second of all, we have to tie money to it. And that's, intersects the budgeting process, which we're going to try to have really a lot earlier, because we're going to do our action planning in January and, prioritize and all that. So if we make a decision that assistant principals are important to the reform effort and we need to increase that number, then we're going to fund that as a priority and before we start funding other things. You see what I mean? So we'll have a prioritized list of what we need to spend the money on. And if counselor turns out to be one of those other areas, then fine. Obviously, I don't have to tell this group there are competing needs, personnel positions, so we'll just have to prioritize.
And that might be an area for sort of technology to help. I mean,
Sure.
my sense of part of the complaint is they're overpaid data entry folks, or at least a lot of their work is data entry, and so you don't really need a counselor per se to do that. So,
Yes, sir. Yeah, we're looking at that as well. What do they spend their time on? And that we don't need to have high-paid data entry people, who should be spending their time with college entry requirements.
Did you have other things you wanted to present to us today? Because I could continue with more questions.
This was it,
Okay.
and I'm at your pleasure.
Okay.
I'm new on the committee, and I was reading the recommendations for comparing salaries of teachers with other districts like Carrollton, etc.
In last year's recommendation.
Yes, the recommendation that was listed. I'm very new. What matrix will they be using to maybe change those salaries that we have for teachers at this point in time? Or will we be changing salaries for teachers?
It's a little premature. We are looking at a pay-for-performance plan for teachers and revamping the teacher evaluation system. Not just the PDOS rubric, but the whole look at what makes an effective teachers and how we assess their effectiveness, and then adding student achievement into that equation, and then paying people for the level of proficiency. All that intersects your question about how we compare our salaries. So we have to make sure that even after a pay-for-performance system is implemented, that we have very competitive salaries, and that we can attract teachers to the district, versus having them leave. Now, right now, I think
But other than the reduction in staff that we've had, before the budget crisis, our turnover was very low.
yeah, turnover has been very low on it. Most urban districts, you're looking at somewhere around 12 to 15% on average. I think ours has been lower than that. I think that the question of turnover is not as important if you have enough proficient teachers that you can recruit. And if you change the recruitment paradigm, which you plan to do. The issue has been that our salary schedule starts at somewhere around 50,000 and goes to 70, low 70,000 in the course of 25, 30 years, which is a very narrow band over that many years. So that there's very little differentiation of the salary. In a pay-for-performance system, the differentiation is much higher. And so you may have people starting out in the high 40s who are new, or 50, and then able to make considerably more money over time. But the only way you can do that in a sustainable way is to make sure those salaries are differentiated pretty significantly and not have as many steps or grades. So you might have 9 levels of performance rather than 300 cells of a salary schedule. But that's for later conversation.
Well, we also, when we discussed the disparity in that we have I think it's 110 million where we're spending more on salaries as compared to our peers, at least through the ERG. But one discussion that we spent a lot of time on last year was that if we weren't budgeting by FTEs, then we could, if we weren't budgeting by bodies but budgeting by salaries, then principals would have the control over having a different mix of salaries and manage their staff that way. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think if you get principals who are strong leaders in the schools and are experienced, give them some parameters, that'll work. I think right now, if you have principals who are struggling to be instructional leaders and to really understand the right mix of staff, that's a little bit more problematic. In the end, I tend to err on autonomy. You know, get the results. If you would prefer a counselor versus an additional AP, then, you know, why not? If you think you can get your math done with, this intersects law and other policy, but, you know, if you think you can get your math done through the Khan Academy, and this class has 40 and this class has 20, because these are kids who can do an online program. The Khan Academy is a math online program. Why not? I think that's a hope to move towards, but we're not ready for that right now.
And I guess just on that particular topic, another thing that came up, because Steve Corby's familiar with how they do it, I believe, if I remember correctly, Houston, one of their APs is a financial person. And so you've got an on-site budget person, is that right?
Houston allocates revenue to campuses and allows the principals to make a lot of decisions that we don't allow the people to make. And a key part of that has been to implement that. They put a assistant principal level person to be at all the major feeder patterns.
So, business manager, essentially.
Exactly, and I'm not sure we're ready for that right now. I think sensitivity around that right now.
Well, and then on that subject, prior to your arrival, when some of us were talking about the budgets, about the role of the commission going forward, one suggestion from a prior member was that we look at campus level budgeting and try to understand how a principal operates, and someone said, well, they really don't have much autonomy, but would you like to see the commission look at changing how campus level budgeting works?
Information is always good for me. The one thing that we're going to be engaging in, and you might help, is how principals are spending Title I and Title II dollars. There's a significant amount of money there, and some buildings are having a hard time spending all their Title I dollars in Title II, and they get to make choices around that. Now, the district also can make some choices and set some parameters around that, and we'll be looking at that. So having the committee look at that might be helpful to us.
And Lisa said I wouldn't delve into curriculum too much, but I thank the district for going from some of its monikers was college ready to college and career ready. I was amazed when my kids finally got to high school. We didn't have any vocational classes. We used to have jewelry making. We don't even have that now. And I understand it's due to the pressures of 4x4 and things like that. But we still have, and I addressed the counselors on that, and their response was, well, they can just go to Dallas County to learn air conditioner repair, plumbing, pipes. I mean, when we're talking about 14, 15, and 16-year-olds that their families are pulling at them to go out and work, we need to be able to provide them tools to say, okay, if you stick with us another 2 or 3 years, we'll give you those tools, not just algebra or geometry, but how that works with PVC, with welding, with things like that. I mean, is there any way we can try to move some of our math into the vocational areas? If you hear where I'm trying to go there.
I think we balance the 4x4 requirements and the college ready requirements and the career ready. One of the things we're going to try to do this year is to define what does that mean, because I think if you ask most folks, and we're going to ask not just this group, but we're going to ask people out in the community, what does career ready mean? What level of math do you actually need? What level of reading and writing do you have to have? So that we know clearly, even for a welder, even for a plumber, you know, what is it that the community says you need? What do people who hire plumbers say they need?
Right.
You know, and so we'll ask that question. If we can meet that and still have the other skills that we can contribute to a child's education, I think that's the way to go. So we're going to be studying that this year. We're going to be looking at convening many groups to try to answer that question. We've already started to do that. So hopefully we'll get an answer to what it means.
While we're on that topic, I hear that you're asking, I guess, businesses or whoever's in the community what type of needs would your student need. Is there a other end of that coin, whereas we're asking students kind of what skills do you feel like you need to be, I guess, more, it's almost kind of like, are we asking the other question around, you know, the students or their families?
Career
or both?
cruising.
Yeah, as far as, because almost asking someone that's in an industry, what do you need? I don't know how certain they can say the industry's even going to be there. But I just see a lot of holes with asking people, what do you need right now from this 16, 14-year-old high school student, and then kind of pushing them, not pushing them, but encouraging them in that direction could also be, as far as, I see a lack of empowerment there, I guess. I'm more of a, this is what you should be, as opposed to, I mean, these kids are going to build the future, kind of, and what that's going to look like.
Yeah.
I think, Justin, you're kind of, you know, we let our students know this is where you need to be when if you want to go the road down college. You have to take these courses, and we're not letting students know what they need to be in order to be a plumber or a electrician. So giving them the, I guess, a timeline or a guideline of what they need to know to stay on track.
And also the entrepreneurial soft skills that, you know, stuff moves.
That's right. It's a great question. I think most people are going to struggle with the answer to that question, you know, and so when we put out the survey, and we'll get some results for you. We've only had 600 respondents so far, and that's a pretty good sample, but we'll do more.
This is businesses and
business, another maybe not 600. That's how many people are in the audience, but I think about 60% answer the survey. Any case, it's about critical thinking, working in teams, some of the soft skills. So how you address adults, how do you dress, do you show up on time? I think those skills also are important to people. the critical thinking, information literacy, financial literacy are things that some people want. It's a lot of stuff. So we're going to try to you know, hone it down to just the, you know, here's what people are asking for. We might have several different profiles because people are asking for different things, and see how we can work on it.
And some of that you could work with Dallas County Community College.
Yep.
Like with dual credit for college, dual credit for certifications, right?
Yes, you're absolutely right. We could do that. We can do it more. I mean, we have some already dual enrollment, dual credit classes.
Well, and at least 4 of us on the commission, our personal experience with our own children is that we chose comprehensive high schools. And it's our observation that these specialties, you have to leave your neighborhood school to get them. And so whether it's to get the TAG program or whether it's to get the cosmetology program, what's your feeling about whether it should be offered in the community school versus the specialty?
I think it's a question of numbers to a certain extent. You know, the degree to which we could offer multiple classes like that at all the high schools, or for example, in middle schools, we already run into some issues with, you know, finding enough people and enough dollars to do that, and the kids too that want to do it. So, I mean, that's why there are those specialty schools and the magnet programs. It's going to be a challenge. Doesn't mean we can't think about how to do better at it.
But also, something else we looked at as a commission last year was building utilization, and I spent a lot of personal time looking at the numbers, and what stood out to me was where I thought that some campuses were their enrollment was down because of you know, change in population. You know, communities go through cycles, but it was not the case. In a lot of cases, there were enough kids within the attendance zone to fill the campus, but they were choosing to go elsewhere. So, you know, personally, I'm in favor of choice, but then I don't like, you know, some of the outcomes that have happened, and that I don't feel like we've spent enough time saying, you know, well, why is the population dwindling on this campus? And sometimes, you know, it's leadership, but you read the recommendation, but sometimes, you know, the campus can have improved, but it's hard to win back the community. And
you know, one of the things we have to look at, I mean, and we are, is a pretty comprehensive facility usage and asset management planning. We have to look at the whole area, the trends in attendance and the boundaries, and see how we can use the facilities better. Also, how the magnet schools and the specialty programs are divided up, and does it make the most sense to have this one here and this one there. I mean, if there's a cosmetology school from the community there, then maybe that makes sense to have a magnet program in the high school. Just things like that, we have to do that study. I know Trustee Jones is very much interested in us doing that facility usage plan and study the whole enrollment trends.
well, and 2 more things on that, but I'd like to hear how choice worked in Colorado. But before we get to that, on the vocational side, this is more comment. I think, again, our personal experiences, the way that we've operated the last number of years in terms of the college ready track, is we've had this focus on how we do class rank. And so you've got kids driven to take AP classes to raise their class rank, and not all, for 2 comments, not all AP classes have the rigor they need, I'll say that for sure. But then the other problem with that path, at least having seen my children go that way, is that they missed some opportunities because the system, they were penalized by taking a fine arts class or penalized by taking a bookkeeping class because they wouldn't have gotten the rank points. So I just put that out as FYI.
Just a couple more questions and I'll gotta get going.
I mean, let me just say, I happened to be at the Dallas Bar Association Education Symposium last week, and the folks in the district that were there did a fabulous job. I mean, I think the audience was very impressed with, you know, the steps that are being taken. And, you know, the emphasis on getting great principals, I think there's a lot of support for that. In terms of supporting the principals, what opportunity are the principals going to be given to evaluate the services they're receiving from central office?
Yeah, we have central office metrics, and on many of the metrics, it's how does the principal feel supported. So we're going to be asking principals how they feel, you know, different departments are supporting them, and so they'll have a chance to do that pretty soon, actually, in a couple months, and then again at the end of the year. Because we know that you're only supported if you feel supported, but all the processes in place. So that's the good. It's just to ask them if they feel like they're getting the support they need.
I'll just add to that. I think there was a big shift in the last year towards a more customer service oriented central office, and a lot of principals I know noticed the difference and were really appreciative. They really felt like they were just out in the field, and phone calls wouldn't get returned for days, sometimes if at all. And then all of a sudden phone calls started getting returned in 24 hours, and they really appreciated that, you know, given all the stress that they're under.
Got to keep that going.
Improving the stakeholder database and getting more of a buy-in. Since my kids are out, I've been refereeing football games all over the place, and it's very, very sad and disheartening when I look up and see maybe 20 or 30 people in the Dallas side versus looking over on Jesuit side. I mean, we've got kids in band, drill team, cheerleaders on the field that, as well as off there when you go to drama and some of the other curriculars. You know, I found that the hook that you have in those kids then, if there's any way to extend that to the parents, how can we do that? I mean, that's just one other venue for us to try to get them is you know, besides having PTA meetings, I think we need to say, parents, come here to see this and see your child, and make it easy for them to do that.
Well, we also our subscription for those programs is way below our peers, and that's something that just broke my heart when I saw this last year. We're 92nd out of 100 in our funding of extracurricular programs, which I call after-school programs, and it's the hook that keeps the kid in school. And
then if we can get the parent to at least come to see, then maybe they'll.
And it's also what another parent said to me, it's our front door. That's when we play these other schools, whether it's in a mock trial competition, which we have few teams, or whether it's a choir competition or chess competition, you know, this is how we represent ourselves to other people who could be stakeholders in our district. And so it just grieves me that we haven't made that a priority. So, you know, I'm curious. I haven't heard anything other than the coaching issues that we've had.
Well, if you look at the indicators of success, you'll see a number of them that involve parent engagement and parent volunteer opportunities. You know, I think you all here will attest to the fact that it is hard to get parents involved. You know, we try to have it, you know, try to make it easier for parents, but if they're not showing up to their own kids' soccer game and band performances, you know, that just shows how hard it is. Doesn't mean we're not going to try. We have several things that are going. You'll see an action plan that's going to try to address some of that parent engagement.
We looked at the proximity of athletic complexes within the ISD, not necessarily of when we go play the Highland Parks or the Jesuits. Of, you know, come to realization that they're going to have more parental support, but even within two DISD schools playing with each other, the proximity and the lack of transportation for a parent to go from a neighborhood high school, going across several miles, across several highways, just those transportation needs are needed to be able to watch their kids.
I have not looked at it.
And that's a good thing to look at, but we've all taken kids home from ball games and theater, and there are cars in the driveways of those parents whose kids we've taken home, and just what you're saying about the athletics and all that, what the community sees in Dallas, I experienced Thursday night. Our son played football at Conrad High School that doesn't even have a football field. It was a practice field. No lights, no benches for the players. A little boy on Conrad broke his collarbone and sat in the trainer's lawn chair, and they called his parents all night. And we almost, asked if we could take him home. But it was so sad because that's what people think of DISD. And we had Franklin Field right across the street. That's both of our field. We couldn't figure out why we were playing on this pitiful field. And we really did. The Conrad team and the Hillcrest team had a good amount of parents there, but just the situation and nobody needed to be playing on that field. Those kiddos really don't even need to be practicing on that field. And again, that's our front door. That's what people think. Oh, well, yeah, so we can't do that. And then they don't hear the good things that we've got going on because they've already witnessed that. But I don't know how to address getting parents to come to these things. I mean, I don't. I would love somebody to enlighten us on it, because we've tried calling, we've tried going and getting them, and it's, if you can't get them to come and watch your kids, what can we do,
Well, we're gonna try a couple of different things, and that's the best we can do, is to keep trying to get parents engaged. We can look at the resources we spend on athletics and extracurricular. We can look at that.
That is such a hook for all these kids.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, get to ask my first question here. It's on your list, so I'll bring it up. It's number 33. Stop using non-certified coaches. Why?
We think certified with certified coaches, we place the emphasis on instruction, and they have a connection with the kids in an instructional way.
Different subject area? Or
In a different subject, meaning like language arts, math, any subject. And that's been the practice in most districts in Texas, and actually most districts in the United States. And people have found that they're more responsive to the kids' educational needs than coaches who are not certified teachers.
can I just offer a few thoughts on that?
Sure.
The level 3 United States swimming coach who's passed many background checks and has received a lot of professional training as a swimming coach. It's in your non-revenue sports, which I guess really all of our sports really are non-revenue sports, but in our potentially non-revenue sports, except for basically football and basketball, you have a lot of coaches that, if they were being evaluated as they are for their teaching credential, would never make the grade. They are not up to standard in the sport. There's the potential of injury to kids that's there. You have a really lack of understanding of the kind of training that it takes to go to another level. You're jeopardizing in many ways for the kids who lack the opportunity for club experience, which costs money, and in a socioeconomically deprived kid, that's a big difference. The high school program has to be the difference maker. So what you wind up with is a bunch of kids with a lot of potential who will never get to reach that potential, and it's costing them scholarship dollars. I can point out, swimmers, baseball players, track kids, volleyball players. There are a lot of people who are, one, at risk because the coaches are so poorly versed in their sports, and two, don't have the ability to take that kid to a level where they could earn some scholarship money at another level. And I've seen it over and over and over again.
The other problem we have is matching the campus need for an art teacher, which might be the only opening, and the athletic director's need for a wrestling coach. And usually those don't match up. So I guess if you and I are on the same sync, we're a little concerned with how this makes that problem even harder to find the right fit. And I go back to other school districts are making it work, and why aren't we studying what they're doing?
I told you about my son for the last time, who went to the Olympic trials twice, in 2008 and in 2012. That was solely due to his opportunity as a club swimmer. Yet in high school, he had to be the swim coach. He had to teach the kids the things to do that the coach did not know. Swimming has a lot of rules, very specific technique kinds of things. And with his background as a 9th and 10th grader, he was basically coaching the high school swim team about half the time, which was taking away from his practice time. But that's not the only isolated. I'm not just whining about an isolated situation. It's something that I've heard about across the district and in a lot of the minor sports.
So we have
you have a lot of human capital out there that would be willing to step in on a volunteer basis and be able to do that. And you talk about public-private partnerships a lot. Here's a great way to engage the private sector.
We have a group of people looking at the whole athletic program, and I'll ask them to consider that, and if it makes sense to them, to make a recommendation regarding that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, and then.
Mr. Superintendent, we really appreciate the time you've taken here tonight. Two quick questions. One, are you just about finished filling out your organization, the folks that you need to bring in for your cabinet deal people? Could you provide the commissioner with an organizational chart, please, with from you on down to see what's changed this year and last year? I think that's been a little unclear. And then. Secondly, do you have a feeling, if not a hard number, the difference between the number of, or the percentage of substitute teachers that are in the schools today versus last year at this time? Same time last year?
Can I hop in, sorry, because my last question is related to a second part. I saw point 7 on the sorry, indicators of success, talking about incoming teachers and just recruiting. Is there also going to be an indicator of success as far as retention and how many of our teachers are we keeping year to year, and what's the average level of experience of our teachers, that type of, I hope that ties in what Mike was asking regarding teachers, but that was my one question that I had left.
Yes, we'll be looking at a lot more indicators than what's on here, and we'll be looking at, retention of effective teachers as one of the things. I don't have that number on the number of substitutes now as compared to last year.
Go ahead.
I know we're staffed at 97% right now, and that's only slightly higher than, or slightly lower than we were staffed last year at this time. 97% fully staffed right now. So that would suggest we might have a few more subs than before. But I don't have the exact number. With regard to cabinet, yes, we are once we hire, and we're in the process of doing that for chief of staff, chief financial officer, and the one new position, cabinet level position we're going to add as a chief technology officer. So we'll have hopefully a cabinet filled out in the next few weeks.
On the, I just want to, since we have a lot of new commission members, I want to tell you that a practice we've had in the last year and a half that we've been operating, if you have follow-up questions such as Michael's about substitutes or any kind of data interest, you know, you can send them to me or send them to Jim Terry.
I
But
also point out on page 41 and 42 is an organizational chart, and 40.
It's actually page,
We'll update the cabinet for this group once I
actually page 33.
one last question. That's news to me that we've got people looking at athletics, because I know we're going to go over recommendations, and the last time I looked on the status of our past recommendations, the suggestion that we have a task force to look at extracurricular was blank on the status, and so you do have, I mean, athletics is one component of
Right,
extracurricular, but so if there are people who would like to participate in that, is that an option?
Sure.
Because we've got some parents with a lot of experience in that. So who would they contact? Jeff Johnson or?
No, probably Ann Smisko would be the cabinet level person. She can direct that person to the right person. Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you.
All right. Next.
Okay, you have in your packet Destination 2020 action plan, the superintendent's 32 critical action items. It's now expanded to the 33. The CBRC recommendations I've left there for reading pleasure. Those will be updated on a monthly basis, so I can already tell you that there's updates that need to come through. We have to make some allowance and changes for Alan King's resignation from the district. Next is Carrie.
Before you move on, does anyone have any particulars on the recommendations that you have a concern about, focus or priority? I think we already hit some of them with our questions.
And I know that you had some other questions you had sent to me, and I'm in the process of answering them, and I'll hand out the daily attendance for currently that we have for the school district. That was one of the questions after Carrie Holt, who was here in place of Byron Sanders. Carrie wrote the Race to the Top, so she is very familiar with the topic. I believe she's here. She'll come up. And now, I don't know, Carrie, did you get a chance to bring the presentation? Otherwise, what we can do is we can use here in the book is the slides. I tried to get them from Byron, but
I have
he was-
it
oh, do
with
you?
me if you want me to use
Okay,
this, or
I-
I can go from the slides that are in here. It's the same.
Your pleasure. It takes a few minutes to
While
get it
you're getting
uploaded.
organized, if I could just carry on with the group to give you examples what Jim's talking about on follow-up questions. We've talked about questions of staff. We had a community member who attended our first meeting who had some follow-up questions. So I've sent those to James. They were, I'm drawing on memory, but they were related to the funding discussion that we had last month and about Title I. And then we'll have a future meeting. We'll talk about Title I. But then I had some, Jim Kipp and I had some follow-up questions based on past recommendations and things. And that was want to know what teacher attendance is looking like this year. I think Mike McNaughton just asked about that, but then a lot of focus on student attendance and the dollars associated with that. I have an interest in pre-K enrollment because we've had some capacity issues there, and then campus enrollment, and then something else that we did as a commission last year. you could go back, but we, the budget people had kind of looked at the overall departments to show how much we had covered as a commission in our review. Percentage of dollars impacted based on who had come before the commission. So I'd asked him to update that so that we would have an ongoing look at kind of the scope of everything we're looking at. Now we'll talk about Race to the Top when you're ready.
I'm ready. We'll just go from the slides that are in your handout. They start on page 83. And I'll just start with an introduction, and then I'll open up to questions. You can ask whatever you want. I have lots of detail, so I'm happy to share anything you would like to hear about. Race to the Top's a federal grant program. They released $383 million that districts can apply directly for, and it's broken down by the number of students that will be served. So the grants range from $5 million to $40 million. We believe that they'll award somewhere between 15 and 25 grants. It's very competitive. There's somewhere just shy of 900 school districts that showed their intent to apply, and we know that you didn't have to have your intent in order to actually apply, so there actually may be more, but it was very, the criteria to be eligible for it was very rigorous. It was very hard for us to do, so I imagine of those 900 school districts, some of them didn't meet their eligibility requirements. And then if you followed any of this in the news, like LA Unified, which we thought was probably one of our biggest competitors, didn't get their teachers union to sign off on it, so they were not able to submit their application. So what is it awarded to? It's awarded for bold and innovative plans to address teaching and learning and this thing called individualized student learning. And really it's about how do you serve each child to their needs? What can we do to add to our curriculum and our teachers' capabilities in the classroom that can help them serve every child? And there's building these learning environments centered on the individual student. There's this personalized education experience. And then the things that we hear over and over, it's part of Destination 2020, increase teacher effectiveness, expand student access to the best teachers, decrease achievement gaps, and increase college and career readiness. So I was not a part of DISD staff when the decision was made to apply for Race to the Top, but actually I haven't introduced myself. I'm Carrie Holt. I started September 5th. I'm new to the district, but not new to DISD. I have 4 daughters that are DISD students, and I've been highly involved as PTA president at Spence Middle School and SBDM and lots of PTA throughout the years. So I come to this position from the business world. My degree's from Harvard in biochemistry and genetics. My career, though, was in computer science. I did highly engineered software systems, especially on complex analytics. And I've been really passionate about education and the education here at DISD. And when they opened up this spot for special projects officer, they needed someone with very technical background. And they also needed someone who was very passionate about kids. And that's my job. I've been waiting for this. And so people think I'm crazy, but I took a huge pay cut to come here. And I felt like, if not me, then who? Who will do it? So I'm here to serve, and I'm proud to be here. So these Destination 2020 objectives that were laid out and the board approved earlier this year, we have, they line up very closely to Race to the Top. So the decision was made to go ahead and apply for Race to the Top, and regardless of whether DISD won, that the exercise would just be a project planning and in-depth strategy for implementing some of the Destination 2020 plans. So starting September 5th, they had a kickoff meeting. That was my first day, and I've been immersed in this since then. The opportunity at DISD is $30 million. We decided to implement it in 2 strategic feeder patterns and use that as a pilot to have some lessons learned and then launch into the rest of the district where appropriate. Some of these are not necessarily district-wide activities. Also, use the money to accelerate some of this. So some of the Destination 2020 plans that we have, we may have to stretch out over 5 or 10 years in order to get it all in. So use some of the Race to the Top money to move it forward. Also to improve technology. There's a big amount of RTT budget that was available for us to go get to improve technology in the classroom, improve technology like student-based technology, so by devices, and also then by software to help them master certain skills. And we didn't have to define that, we just had to say we're going to budget for what that is. And then for teachers, the opportunity for the teachers is to really give a lot of input. I believe that some of the decisions around Race to the Top and how we're going to use that money is going to be very dependent on teacher input and what's right for their classroom and right for their campuses. There's also a big push to use data systems for decision making. So data-based decision making. How do you know how to help a child if you don't know what their gaps are? And we certainly know those gaps from all the test requirements. So making some of that more available to the teacher and helping them understand how to read it. So those were the goals for Race to the Top and the opportunities. And for students, I heard y'all talk about the college and career readiness. A big, huge piece of Race to the Top is we addressed what Mike was talking about around the strategic feeder patterns and what we're going to do around college and career readiness, and some of the identify what the needs are in the community. That's my project as well. So, and it's also a big, huge piece of RTT. Also, are you familiar with collective impact, the concept of collective impact? If you look at the community services that we have wrapped around our schools, so after school programs, health, counseling for parents, all the different community services that can be available to our students. There's a project going on in West Dallas around Pinkston High School called the School Zone. It's replicated a little bit after Promise Neighborhoods, or it is Promise Neighborhood, and it's replicated over the Harlem Children's Zone. And so there's a project on Destination 2020 that we also call Strategic Feeder Patterns around the collective impact. How do we understand what's happening at Pinkston and what's working and what's not working, what the gaps in services are, what do our kids need, which ones actually contribute to academic success, measuring that, and then how do we replicate it into another school, and the other school we're going to try to replicate it into is Lincoln. And when we say Lincoln, it's not just the high school, it's the feeder pattern going to that high school. So you'll see there's one slide that shows what all the schools are, and if you're familiar with our feeder patterns, you might think these aren't clean, and that's true. So some of these schools do not necessarily feed into that high school, but some of the kids in that elementary school do. And if any of the children in that elementary school ended up at one of our feeder patterns, we included that so that we had them all the way through the path.
So some split to other,
like in
some of the kids
Kinkany
end up
is
at
a good
Molina.
example. Some of them end up at Sunset. And then at Billy Earl Dade, half of them end up at Madison right now. But we didn't say, oh, we're not going to take this one, we took them all. So if any of the kids feed to that high school, then we took all of those schools. And there's one that's not on here, that's Dallas Environmental Science Academy. It's part of the Pinkston feeder pattern, and it's included as well. And so in our enrollment.
Oh, you're going to say that. Go ahead.
So for the students for our grant, it's 14,601 based on the enrollment of this year. And that put us in the grant bracket for $20 to $30 million. And our actual total that we asked for was $29,999,810. So we got as close to $30 million as we could get. I'll skip over theory of change. So the DISD application strategy, if you'll look at that slide, this is really the overarching projects that are part of Race to the Top. So secondary student trajectories, that's just really your college and career readiness. Starts back in the 6th grade with exposure And in the grant, we actually added teachers at the high school level to teach the soft skills, so critical thinking. And we haven't identified what that is, but when we do, then we would add those teachers. The second one is student advocacy management. Student advocacy management is what I was telling you about, collective impact, but it also involves changing the way we serve our students in the school. So we know that any student that has a one-to-one relationship with a teacher has a much better chance to be successful. And so we're trying to create those at each school where they have an adult that they meet with weekly, and it stays the same throughout their path through high school. And then the same thing through middle school, and the same thing through high school. And then have those people be responsible for kicking students up into what we would call a student support team when they need extra help, whatever that is. And then having a very organized collective impact team where we can designate. So if you're familiar with our community liaisons, it's very hard for them to be effective. It's providing them a great deal of support, great deal of training, and also volunteers from the outside that will support them and help them find the need, fill the needs for these kids. Then technological infrastructure. Mostly we spent money on digital classrooms, some devices, and then software. And then the strategic staffing initiative, also you were asking some questions about that earlier. So there's 3 key pieces to the strategic staffing initiative. The first is recruiting, selection, and retention. So what can we do to make sure that we recruit the best teachers? How do we select the right ones with the heart and the will to teach, not just the credentials? And then how do we retain the teachers? We have great teachers, how do we retain them? So today, if they're really good, we don't spend a lot of time encouraging them, and so putting programs in place to do that. Then the second piece is the teacher leadership model. We call it teacher career paths as well. And we're just putting it in at these 2 schools and the feeder patterns as a trial. It is at the back of Destination 2020. If you remember, there was an org chart about high schools, and it showed a department leader, 4 department leaders, and then for each grade level there was a department grade level lead. Well, putting that structure, if you will, in place, it looks very similar in middle school, somewhat modified at the elementary school. It also goes with these assistant principals that Mike was mentioning. Do we add assistant principals so that there's one for every 300 students? So in the grant proposal, we put assistant principals. We didn't put them in the grant dollars. We put them as a supporting project. And then for these teacher leadership, you give them extra periods to coach. So this is how you improve the teaching quality. Yeah, this is how you improve the teaching quality. And so if you want our best teachers to be able to help other teachers come up to speed and to develop curriculum with all this technology built into it, then we've got to give them time to do that. And when at the department level, we suggested 4 extra periods a day, or 4 total coaching periods a day, and then the grade level team leads 2 extra coaching periods a day. So that required some additional teachers to backfill those positions, and that was one of the things that we put in the grant as well. So at a high level, that is what we did. I want to read to you a couple of rules about Race to the Top that will, I think, make you feel more comfortable about what we did.
Just a quick question about your last point.
Sure.
The scaffolding, a great teacher is going to be being coach a teacher, but as a result, they're going to have less instructional periods. Is that?
Well, the idea is that they're not necessarily going to have less instructional periods, but they may instruct with a different teacher. So the idea is for them to do in-class instructional coaching. So if we have a teacher that's a master teacher in, let's say, chemistry, then that teacher would help other chemistry teachers teach their classes. And I don't think we've defined exactly what that means. We have to try this out. This is innovative, right? This is something new. So let me read to you real quick. There's a lot of rules. These are the rules. But there's some that are very important that made me feel really comfortable about what we were doing, because my biggest fear was we're going to put something in the budget and it's going to cost Dallas in the long run. So what made me feel comfortable? So if the grant is awarded, the decisions will be made in December. The funds begin in January of 2013. So if we happen to win, within 100 days of the award, we actually put in our scope of work, which includes the budgets and the goals and whatnot. So this was, if you look and at the very front of the budget, it says crystal clear pre-decisional draft. So they know that this is not necessarily the budget you're going to stick to. This was just your ask dollars.
That you were just holding, I've seen that online, but you didn't.
No, this is just the budget part.
Oh, okay. All right.
This is just the budget part. This is the narrative that's online. And then
Okay.
the budget was, you had to justify all of those different categories that you read about. The application, when we crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's, was 755 pages long. I mean, it was just unbelievable how complicated it was. But so we have 100 days to submit scope of work. And there's a really good continuous improvement clause that we pounded throughout the application. And basically it goes like this: because the applicant's high quality plan represents the best thinking at a point in time and may require adjustments and revisions during the implementation, and so on. So there's a formal process for us to update, to change our mind. So let's say that we've made these decisions at a high level that we want to spend the money this way, and funding changes between now and next school year. And as long as we're within the theme of what it is that Race to the Top budgets, then we can go back and change them a great deal. And I went to some of the other Race to the Top states that have won and looked at how did that process go. And we found that some of the states that are getting good grades had done a lot of modification, and the states that were getting bad marks that weren't being measured well is because they hadn't changed their measures based on what was changed in their plans. So I feel that Dallas is going to be fine if we win this grant money, as long as we continually modify our plans and the measurements so that what we're actually doing, we're getting measured on.
Is this grant over 1, 2, 3, 5? 4 years.
4
Okay,
years.
sorry. So 30 over 4 years. Okay.
And I thought I also heard at the board briefing or at some point, it's over that 4-year span, it's not 100%. Does at some point, does it trickle out to other campuses, or is it all 4 years on the
It's not all 4 years on those two campuses. So some of the strategies are district-wide strategies. And so we use some of this money to begin to push it out district-wide. And in some cases, it's more of for the lowest performing schools, we're going to add these extra support. And so like in the student advocacy model, we added 2 at-risk counselors that will support not just our college counselors, but our community liaisons that will really deal with the dropout rates at these schools and some of the other really serious adult problems these kids have to face. And so those are some of the things that we added, and that wouldn't be necessary at all schools.
Which kids would you start the implementation with? What grade? I know you talked about 6th grade, but that will only reach them to.
We covered all of the kids in the feeder pattern. So let's say that we allocated money to buy devices and software. Let's say that someone decides that for kindergarten the right device is some iPads, so that there's enough for each class to have them, and that there's a certain kind of software that they want to use for reading, then that will be available to them. And really at these schools, if you look at the ratio of computers to children, it's almost 1 to 2. There's 1 to 2. Some of them are outdated, some of them are teachers' computers, some of them are library computers, but this will supplement that so that they have enough technology for them to run whatever programs they want to in the classrooms.
Is this in relationship to the technology program for the ISD, them putting new technology into the classroom?
So all we did was take the plan, the IT plan for the classroom and allocate Race to the Top budget dollars to do that. So right now we're using the bond, the 2008 bond to fund technology in the classroom. And like for digital classrooms, about 25% of our classrooms today are digital classrooms. So we use some of that money to increase that percentage.
When you're speaking about our classrooms, you're talking about that feeder pattern. Okay, Jim?
So, what are you anticipating in terms of overall for those 14,000 students? How many teachers and other staff will you be adding?
I can
I
tell
mean,
you.
I'm ballparking. You probably have, what, 900 teachers on all those schools combined?
Total number of teachers in those schools, yeah, that's about right. I can tell you how many we added. 34 additional assistant principals, if we do one for every. And there's some schools may not need that as an extra one, so.
You're including the elementary schools?
Yes,
3, oh.
Yes, ma'am. So we ran the number of APs, and then we ran the number of the enrollment, and we just did it. If it was over 300, they got another one. And then for the class coverage that I was talking about around teacher leadership model, that creates 48 additional teachers that we funded through the grant.
Is that it?
Well, okay, go ahead.
I'm just trying to get ahead. I mean, in a sense, it's good, but I have a concern that goes with it, which is that when the grant's over, what becomes of all those positions?
We had to deal with sustainability. So at the back of each one of these projects, we looked at, what was the sustainability for 3 years following. So what would, if we had to sustain this, each one of these programs for 3 years following, what does that look like? And then how would that be funded? And, could we, some of them, if you look at the collective impact in wrapping community services around the schools and having all of these tutors, if you look at taking it to many schools, the dollars, not for DISD, but for the nonprofits, gets really high really fast.
So, Ms. Holt,
Yeah.
if we win the grant, then aren't we required to sustain this past the 4 years? Isn't there a 6-year?
It's 7.
7
So
years.
3 years after the grant.
So we get $30 million over 4 years, but we are required to sustain this for 7 years.
So if we, that's news to
We
me.
have to find the funding to do that.
But here's the good news, is that many of these projects are in our Destination 2020 projects that we're going to do anyway. I said many, all of them are. So nothing that's in this race, the top grant, do we have to sustain that wasn't planned anyway. If we choose, and let's say that we win this grant and we start writing these scopes of works, the board has to approve every single one of them. And let's say they don't. They come back and they say, we don't think that the teacher leadership model with all these extra teachers is the right way to spend this money. Then we'll have to come up with a different way that they do approve, and then we'll modify the plan.
I may think also in terms of the programs that we're going to put in place with the new action plans, a lot of those will be absorbed into the budget. So if they're absorbed into the budget, it would probably free up dollars if it's not utilized in other areas down to the bottom line. Currently, we have $189 million in the general fund, which is not bad, and we'll probably add more by the end of this year. And so at the end of the 4 years, and again, this is my forecast, is that I think in terms of our revenue dollars from the state, because of the courts that, they're dealing with inequity of funding throughout the district, and I think they're going to find in our favor. So I think that funding over the next 4 years are going to at least maintain, if not get a little better. And so if we're judicial about our budgeting over these next 4 years, I do think that we would be able to sustain this program over the next 4 years.
For these schools, or
After the 3 years, once
We're
it's...
only required to
Right.
sustain it for the strategic feeder patterns that we identified in the grant.
so let me put it sort of in dollars and cents. I mean, if you were to add up the budgets for those schools, right, for those 2 feeder patterns, what percentage increase? Not for the one-time costs per se, right? Because I appreciate that some of these things are, things that were going to be dollars the district was going to spend anyway that were going to be done system-wide. But I'm thinking in terms of, 34 APs, another 48 teachers, some additional counselors, But it sounds like that's going to add at least 10%, and I don't know how you. I mean, you might be able to sustain it at 2 feeder patterns, but the district doesn't have a budget that allows it to add 10% to all campuses district-wide.
So we looked at the numbers and just ran it out to other strategic feeder patterns just to understand what that meant. We're not obligated to maintain that. We ran then I'm an analyst, so I want to know exactly what it would look like. So for 34 APs, which is these 2 strategic feeder patterns, the APs roughly is $2.7 million. And 48 FTEs, which is what would be created for this teacher leadership throughout the elementary, the middle schools, it's about $2.9 million, just roughly. And so if you run that out to 4 strategic feeder patterns, it's for APs it's 5.3, and for teachers it's 5.7, and so on. And we just estimated that it's the same number of teachers per feeder pattern, and that estimate may be high.
Did I understand you saying that you would be hiring teachers to teach critical thinking?
I said curriculum for college and career readiness, specifically the career readiness, and that's added in years 3 and years 4 of the grant, because at this time it's not identified what that should be. It could be vocational, it could be adding some pods like we were talking about. Cosmetology is only available at Skyline, maybe offering that at some other school, but that's not identified yet. So it's just allocated to fund that, whatever it is.
Yeah.
During this period for these feeder patterns, how does that go into play with our Title I funding and equitable cost per student?
I had a lot of comparability questions. Were there issues around that? As long as you pay for those positions out of grant funds, then they are not counted.
I did a little investigating myself, but maybe Steve or Jim could handle it. But the way I interpret it is the comparability. It's not how you're sharing the Title I funding, it's how you're sharing the base level funding, so that if your base, you don't reduce your base level funding simply because a school gets other funding. Is that right?
Well, comparability is, it's looking at FTEs, and as long as they're comparable with the, they're broken up to high school, middle school, and elementary schools. And then we look at non-title versus the title levels, and as long as they're comparable. And
So you can
it says
a measurement of state and local funds.
Not grant funds.
not federal funds.
Right.
So as long as we give them the same state and level funds that you're giving other you can continue to give them extra federal funds. Is that a simple way to say it? Instead of thinking that you have to distribute evenly all federal funds.
Implementation of this, let's say you're going into the Lincoln things, would you, your first year, do you do all 4 years there? I mean, all 4 grades? Or do you say, okay, we're actually going to start our freshman class and do a rolling startup our 4 years? And does that save you money? And, in other words, are we going to spend the same amount of dollars on a senior that we don't have to train that's probably already checked out anyway than we are on a freshman?
Some of the cases we're going to serve all of the students, so the technology purchases, right? So AP Chemistry serves many different ages, so you serve all the students. Some of the college and career readiness, some of the counseling, the benefit obviously is going to be more for the students beginning.
I want to get a little more. 2 questions. Where can we see some of this data? Like, I'd like to see a pie chart and that sort of thing. And then second question, I'm interested in following up on Michael's question about what we're committed, if we are awarded this, what we're committed to going out.
I can show, I have excruciating detail, so I'm happy to share it. The reason you haven't seen it yet is we literally finished it at 9 p.m. on Thursday night, and it mailed out Thursday night. So we worked on it up until the deadline just to make sure that we were eligible and that we had checked all the boxes. So it's too large to email, so the file is just too big, so I have to carry it around on a stick. But I'm happy to share it with whoever and get feedback, because ultimately some of the next steps are, we've already had some community meetings where we talk to parents, we talk to teachers. We have a lot more of that to do to find out, okay, we said we were going to buy technology for your school. What does that mean? What are the things that we want? And then also work within curriculum and understand what it is that they have planned and how can we help support that.
But in pure dollars, and I like your optimistic view about getting more funding, but let's say that doesn't work out, and let's say we get federal funding cut, and we're just dealing with less dollars. What are we obligated? I still don't understand what our obligation is. Is it 30 and 30?
My estimate would be is in 4 years, if the program lasts, it would be about 2% or about $20 million. Now, Carrie might have a different figure, but that's off the top of my head.
And is it the kind of thing where, compliance-wise, we're going to have to capture it like an E-rate type thing, where we have to show we spent, we're getting credit for having spent a matching gift, so to speak?
I took a lot of time to understand how we have to report against sustainability. And it also goes in line with some of the changes. So we have to sustain the program as long as our continuous improvement process says that it's the right thing to do. So if our continuous improvement process says that career ladders isn't working, then we don't have to sustain that. We can say that the decision has been not to sustain this project. I mean, that's one of the ideas behind the grant, is it allows you to try some.
Let you off the hook for matching?
So in some cases, there's no sustainability dollars. It's all one-time fees. So around technology, it's one-time fees. We did add some resources, and we called them instructional technologists. But basically, we added high-end teachers that have successfully implemented technologies in the classroom for specific types of classes, and that they would assist with adding that into the curriculum at the school level, one-on-one with the teachers. We just have, it's a concept, so it requires some definition. But other than that, that's all one-time cost. The teacher leadership model, that's the only thing that has substantial headcount that stays. And you have to, like I said, I feel very comfortable that if we decided not to sustain it, we could justify it.
So to get off the hook of matching, you have to justify that it's not working.
Yeah, and
okay.
We have to provide a lot of measures, and I think if it was really working, that we would find a way to fund it. So I feel good that if we chose not to, that we would have a good reason to do so. And I mean, it could be that it's unsustainable. That could be the reason you don't fund it.
Yeah, can you speak a little bit to the staffing initiative? I know that our superintendent mentioned a little bit about taking some of that load off the principals. And so how does a recruiter know what a specific school needs and to match them up to the right school? Just because, you mentioned earlier you can have all the credentials, but how do we know that it's a good fit for the school?
There are, let's see, they're called recruiting and selection coordinators. And there's, I think, 7 of them. And they work with specific schools. And each of them would create profiles for what it is that they're looking for, and then they would work to fill those profiles. But on the other side, trying to learn from a very high level, what are the things that you see that make a great teacher? It's not always having a master's. Sometimes it's something else. So what are those something else's? And they've been interviewing a lot of principals about, what is it that when you're interviewing that you're looking for that we could help pre-select. And that's in a very early process. I mean, that started in September, and I see, meetings going on with teachers and principals as they discuss how to do that better.
Carrie, do you happen to have a stick with that grant with you today, or can I get one? Because we can put that up on our servers and have it available to everybody in a heartbeat.
Yes, I have the original documents that we blended together to make the 755 pages. So there's a budget narrative, there's budget spreadsheets, and they all fit together. I don't have that huge piece that we actually submitted. It's on Byron's computer.
Okay.
And so he was going to burn me a copy so I could hand out to you exactly what was submitted to the OD. But ahead of that, I'm happy. I mean, the documents are as they went in. They're just individual pieces.
Can you just zip it and stick it on the DISD servers and send us a link? That'd be great, so we can.
And I'm happy to
answer. That's not going to compromise our grant
No,
application by doing that.
I don't think so. It was before everybody submitted theirs. I was trying to keep it pretty quiet because it's very competitive in our strategies. We didn't want Houston or whoever else was competing to understand what our strategies were.
Thank you.
So these teachers who will be instructing the team, et cetera, will they have classrooms? A student population?
Academic coach.
Which teachers?
Teaching instructionally as well?
So within the teacher leadership model, and this may change, so as it's defined today as a proposed, is that there's 4 teachers that would be department leads that would teach 4 periods a day and have 4 coaching periods a day.
How different is that now?
They probably have 2 instead of 4. Some of them just 1, depends on the school. And then let's go to department team leads. So there's a 9th grade math team lead, a 9th grade science team lead. Those teachers just have 1 planning period like every other teacher, and we would give them 2.
Give them 2 planning periods?
Okay. Thank you. And then remember, members, you can send follow-up questions.
In the appendix, you will find you all had questions about some of Cecilia Oakley's presentation and some of the, I think, the conversion from stars, which she sent was something over 100 pages. So I gave you the links. You should all have this electronic version so you can go out to those links and connect. It should answer all your questions.
That second link doesn't work.
Okay, I think that there's been a correction to that, so I don't know, Mike, if you received the.
Yeah, I got the update and tried the link this afternoon.
Okay, I will change it and get it corrected. Thank you. Also, you have the special revenue funds on page 89. You will see that they're presented to you in 2 ways. The first way is by fund number, which is the far left. The total at the bottom there is $169 million. And then that's broken down in the pages following by org, so you can look at a particular org and see what the budgeted dollars and the actual spent year to date is. The next appendix C, which starts on page 95, is the current budget calendar. That's going to undergo some transformation, so don't read it with this grain of salt, because I've got to incorporate the new action plans and the superintendent's changing of the structure of the process for budgeting. So I'm in the process of updating that budget calendar. And finally, the contact list. I know I've got to update. There's some new members here that I haven't had a chance to update, so I will update that. I will send you all the update, and of course they will be in the updates to the next agenda, which right now is scheduled for January 14th, unless the chairperson wants to do otherwise.
Okay. Well, the approach we took was, until we get in, to give those of you who are new of background, when we started a 1.5 years ago, the approach was we had to look for savings. And so it helped me if Steve was here, but we were looking for savings. So we looked at large organizations and talked about how they functioned and talked about priorities, and then and made recommendations related to you know, things that we felt like needed to be protected, and other things to look at. And then the next year, we as part of the budget process continued to look at departments and understanding again how they function, and again priorities and ways to look for savings. And then part of looking at the overall budget, you know, you all were following kind of comprehensively the scope of how many dollars we had looked at departmentally. And then also in there were big topics about custodial outsourcing and salaries and how we compare to our peers, and help me with other things. Another big one being comparability from the beginning because of the rules around Title I funding. But so when we were talking about how to go forward this round, some people suggested, well, haven't we looked at all these departments? Well, actually, we haven't. We haven't looked at some big items like Title I more comprehensively, and food services, and real estate and leasing, and then there are other things that we'll probably want to come back to. But, you know, if you all have feedback on that, let me know, and we can adjust things. But then, of course, we also, as you all go through the budget process, we start to really look at the dollars and what's changed year to year, right?
Yes, and I think also that the superintendent would definitely like y'all to look at the action plans and the priorities. That's what I heard him talk about today. So I'll work with the superintendent, and we will send you some guidance on that.
In your special revenue funds, what is EHA dash, where I lost it?
Education.
EHA Title VI dash B regular, 26 million.
Yeah, it's special ed dollars. Off the top of my head, I would need to look that
Okay.
to see if I have that. Unless
It's
you know, Steve,
93.
off the top of your head.
And then also the grants management was 13 million.
Now, part of that is kept with grants management and will be distributed at a later time. Now, we're going to bring in Jordan Roberts in January to go over the details of each one of those funds. So if you've got questions, that would be the good time to bring up those questions.
These are funds you've already received through grants.
These are funds that are in the current budget. This is budgeted this year. And the expenditure on the right is what we've actually expended. And you can see by fund number and also by org number.
Just picked out the two big ones over there on the.
Yeah.
You have a question, Bob? Sorry.
That was in page 93, special revenue funds, was the last page, I believe.
Jim,
Second to last page.
And what was the number?
Oh, it was number 880 and 745.
$26 million.
So I think those are special ed funds, but I will definitely get back and get back to you 880 and 775.
Yeah, that's idea.
That's the idea.
That's special ed. And the grants management number is basically the private, we flow money through to the private parochial schools that are based on their free and reduced lunch. And that's part of that. But we'll get the rest of that and follow up with it.
Jim, are you aware if the superintendent's process changes is going to significantly affect the chart of accounts, the org names, and the breakdown that we've had for the last 3 years that we've been looking at?
No.
Okay. But do you think we'll be able to do some year-over-year comparisons and
Yes.
have them be fairly accurate?
Yes, absolutely.
There'll be some noise in there, but by and large, you'll be able to draw lines.
We consolidated, I think 14 orgs. So there is some consolidations, but we know where those consolidations happen, so we should be able to do comparisons.
Can you kind of a thumbnail sketch of what those are for us so that we can know what we're looking for when we go back to look at last year's budgets compared to this year?
Okay, I'll bring in.
I don't want to put too heavy a burden on you guys because I think you got a lot of work to do. So.
Actually, I believe in the last in October, if you look at, I listed the budget high to low, and if you look at the bottom of that review, I believe.
I think you've already done that. I just think you just
Yeah, that's what I'm telling you, is that if you will look at that, you will see the organizations that no longer exist. I'm trying to find the page number for you here.
And it shows what those are blended into. Right.
No, it doesn't show what's blended into, it just shows which ones. But I will get which organizations they were blended into to you.
And we do have, the inconvenience of having the legislature that's going to start meeting in January too, that we're going to have to monitor pretty closely. And as I think Jim pointed out to you guys before, if they do nothing, which people don't believe that that's what's going to happen, we would lose another $40 to $45 million in the next 5 years.
Yeah, I anticipate it'll be reminiscent of, our meetings will be reminiscent of our first phase of meetings, because we'll get new information each.
Daily.
Is that going to be 40 to 45 million a year or for the biennium?
He said bye.
I think it's for the biennium, but I'll have to go back and double check that.
Yeah, it's the biennium.
It's the biennium.
I have a follow-up question that I suspect you all could answer now, and that is, could you explain for us again what the goals are or ideals of fund balance and
What the board policy says is that we should maintain, we should strive to maintain, it's not an absolute, but strive to maintain 2 months operating expenses plus a sufficient amount of money so that we don't have to borrow to meet the cash flow ups and downs throughout the full year. We are frankly at that point right now. We will make it through the low point of the year without having to borrow on the trans. We were pretty conservative, and we got a commitment of $50 million, and it does not appear that we will have to draw any of that down. We'll make the final decision at the end of this month. And as Jim alluded to earlier, that because we have a lot of new management in place, and we have, and in particular, a lot of changes in human capital management, we'll probably maintain, I think the superintendent acknowledged this too, a little bit higher vacancy rates than we did, and maybe not as close to spending all the budgeted funds. So we would expect to add some money to that fund balance. So I would say we would come out of this year with a very adequate fund balance to as a cushion and to meet our intra-year financing needs.
I might also add that the TEA FASRAC Financial Accounting Systems Resource Guide recommends 2 months worth of fund balance, as does the General Fund, GFOA, Government Funds Association, Officers Association. So, in $200 million is about 2 months worth of cash flow. When our budget is, at 1.2 million, it's just a little below 1.2 million. So I bet 1.2 billion. So that's just add about 100 million a month. So two months would be $200 million. Now I always make the recommendation is that I look at the rating agencies, and I think I've spoken to this before, is that the rating agencies give an underlying rating to school districts when they go out for bonds, And in order to be in the very highest underlying ratings, which would be strong, they're looking at about 1/3 of your revenue flow, or 3 months worth of cash budget. So that would be about $300 million. Now, don't let me be misunderstood, is that, you know, under PSF, the
SF is.
school,
Permanent school
school funding, we get insurance, so we're always rated, you know, in the highest category, but there is an underlying rating that the agencies look, even though we take out the insurance. That page number is page 76 on your last agenda, which lists all of the orgs, and you will see there's 13 orgs that have no budget in this year, and those are the ones that were consolidated. That's on the previous month's agenda.
One more question on the fund balance. Do you have a feel for how we compare to our peers? I just have heard that there, when we went through the budget shortfall as a state, that other districts didn't have to make the cuts that we had to, because they had anticipated the legislative or the shortages, and had intentionally built up their fund balances.
Well, I can tell you, the school district I came from, since I was in charge, that's exactly what happened. So we anticipated, and of course we were already looking at 3 months worth of fund balance. So now I'm not privy to, and I haven't looked at it. Maybe Steve has looked at the other districts around the state.
I think that the fact is that those, you know, you have to treat those reductions as if they're permanent. So even if you can't fund them out of fund balances indefinitely, nobody can do that. It's just not proven. There are some people that delayed it and softened the blow and took it out over a longer period of time. But as far as I know, there was nobody that just, I mean, there were a couple of people that TEA had to take over that refused to. The school board couldn't fire the, I mean, they couldn't make the adjustments. They didn't have the political will to do it, so TEA had to come in and do it. But other than that, everybody made reductions.
Okay. So the goal is somewhere in the range of 200 to 300 million, depending on what you're.
I think the superintendent very much would like to keep it at 200 million.
The superintendent has said publicly that he doesn't really see any need to add to the general fund, but isn't it, as a generalized statement, prudent for the bond rating agencies if we make small incremental additions to the reserve fund?
We just finished going through I just finished going through all of the rating calls for the refunding that we're going to do next week. And essentially they left us flat, despite the fact that we've increased fund balance over the last couple of years. I think they're pretty gun shy right now, and about anything positive for anybody. But so I don't know. As long as we've never had an issue selling our debt that had a permanent school fund guarantee on it. And our short-term financing is you know, very low interest rates, and it's not really impacted significantly by the rating, because it's due. It comes due when we have the most money. You know, it's February 15th, and that's when we peak out for tax collection.
Okay. One last thing, Trustee Cowan, do you want to address the group for me? I don't think did you make it last week? Okay. He's our liaison or a designee.
Being here. Welcome to my world.
Louisa, I would like to just go over this for just a little bit. This is one of the questions, was a comparison between last year's enrollment and this year's enrollment. So this handout is basically 45 days for last year versus this year. So the current year is in red and last year's in blue, and you can see in the first approximately 2 weeks we have a lot of noise in the system. Now, the noise in the system, it kind of works like this: is that students that are on our books or in our database will leave during the summer to go to other schools, and they don't let us know. They don't have any really motivation to say, hey, I'm leaving Dallas. But all of those students that are coming in will register during the summer, and especially just before school starts. And so we have kind of a lot of noise in our enrollment. And what we do is we then start cleaning up, and you can see where the dip happened September 7th. The other date I want to point out is on October 1st was what we called our leveling number. That number was 159,229 students. And that's what we use to go and rerun our ratios and do a settle up, both from a budgetary point of view and from an FTE point of view, where HCM looks at the staff to teacher ratios and the actual numbers that are out there at the campuses, and either adds or take away teachers or positions. And what we do is remember that currently we gave approximately $50 per student to each one of the campuses for what are called controllable dollars. And if they didn't make the projection, we actually only take 50% away. But if they got additional students, we gave them another $50 per student. With the exception of, we monitor every single account in every single organization. And if somebody was in the red, meaning they'd already spent the budget, we actually went back and we adjusted that number in terms of what we gave them, so that they understand the importance that they stay in the black.
So the incentive funds were given to the schools rather than to the students who came?
The incentive, if you're talking about the energy, energy incentives, we're doing it this year.
I think you might be talking about the gift card.
They do that this year, and will they do it next year?
Which incentive are you talking about?
Maybe it was the gift card. It was.
That was the Dr. Blackburn,
Dr.
and a couple of people independent. That wasn't
that was independent. Oh, that was the
energy incentives. But then he's talking about, I think, budget funds based on after leveling, whether you got more money or not.
All right. I understand. Okay.
But I'd like to. What does this all mean in terms of everything we discussed last year about the importance of getting kids to school earlier in this, enrolled earlier?
I think there was a positive effect, and one of the positive effects was the fact that they started the pre-K and the kindergarten, right away, instead of waiting that, and that probably added $120,000 to the to what will eventually become the
Still a lot of noise in that first 2 weeks of school.
So I think it was beneficial. Now, how much more it added when we looked at the raw numbers? It looked like there was about 10,000, but I believe about 8,000 of them were the little kids that came for that first week.
So if I'm reading this correctly, we have about 2,000 more students at that October 1st leveling than we did last year. Is that correct?
Well,
157 versus 159.
Well, we project. Yeah, I was trying 158,000. So it's not. It's not 2,000. I can bring you the exact number, but I don't remember. Last year, I believe the number was 158,700. So that would make it about 500 more.
So that's.
It might be a little bit more. It might be closer to 6. I can bring you the numbers.
What every 100? I mean, every 1,000 kids is what $5 million.
Approximately.
All right. Well, that's a nice little bump.
Yeah.
We just have to maintain it throughout the year, because the WADA is the average every day for the rest of the year. And you get a lot of peaks and valleys.
I'm sorry.
The big drops after Labor Day, or around Labor Day, both years, are those generally finally we're writing kids off that
clean up the system,
figured out that they never weren't here
Sometimes you end up with kids at two campuses. They were pre-enrolled at one and they enrolled at another, and it takes a while.
So it could be a double count.
Yeah, it takes a while for all the data to catch up and get it cleaned up. We've been continually moving that back. Jim moved it back significantly this year to get the data cleaned up, because the most important thing is that if we've got kids that if we need to add teachers in a campus, we need to get them out there soon, so we minimize the disruption to the kids on the campuses.
Leveling took place in the third week this year.
Okay. And that's 2 weeks
Began.
earlier than it's ever been done.
Right.
So you may have answered this earlier, but I want to make sure I understand. There were several campuses, I'm not sure how many, that tried some experimental programs to get more kids there day one. What's been the assessment of the effectiveness of those? Did those work? Are they going to do those again next year?
Well, we can tell you that the overall first day enrollment this year was larger than it was last year. By I want to say it was 10,000 plus, but as I say, I think about 8,000 of that were the pre-K.
It'll be really important that we make a push in the spring before we lose them all to summer break, so they understand the importance of getting there in the fall. Because I don't think we addressed that until after they were out of school.
And then,
I know the communications was responsible for that program, and it might be good for the committee to look at and talk to the chief of communications and express some of your.
Well, another thing, talking, we had the technology person here last time, when he was talking about how that we should be able to have our schedules done and all that kind of stuff in the spring when they go home in May, so that, because we've experienced it at our schools, that kids may sit in the auditorium for 2 weeks because they can't get their schedules done. So they're not there.
The bigger problem than that is turnover at the principal level, and the new principal, the old principal, the new principal didn't get there in time, hadn't developed their schedule. They are doing a much better job of that. We had, when we converted over to the Chancery system, it was a very rough start of school. But as we've gone through that, it's gotten a little bit better, and we've educated the principals have gotten better educated. We've given them more support to be able to get their schedules done early. And you can't do a schedule first day of school. I mean, it's got to be done, or it'll be a complete.
Oh, I know.
Yeah,
Trust
we
me,
know.
we know.
well, and even, again, to reiterate what came up before, is even, allowing enrollment of people who are coming from outside the district. It doesn't make sense to us. Again, they're just a handful of stories, but you've got to feel like it happens everywhere, where people attempt to enroll when they move in the summer and they're told come back.
And they have to take a second seat. They have to take a back seat to the kids that are already in the district.
There's a lot of work on trying to implement technological solutions to that. I don't think it's going to be next year, but I think in the near future you'll start to see that become a lot easier.
Well, and it might be a follow-up question, but years ago, if you attended an open house in the spring, some people call it kindergarten roundup, you enrolled. So that's a good 8 months before you're going to go through the door.
Yeah, but we have a mobile society though nowadays, so.
Right, but take what you can. So,
There's 3 months free special, they're going to run to that apartment complex.
yeah, but that brings up, getting ahead of the demographic shifts and finding out why people move, and we've got an issue in our area where we just found out apartments are coming down, or people need to get out of vacate an apartment complex in November, and that's going to empty a school.
Louise, do we have an agenda set for the January meeting yet? I don't have it in front of me, and I don't recall what it is. So, do you have it?
Well, we had draft agendas and that went out in the first email, but they're fluid. Some things that were going to be on this agenda are getting moved to that one.
Well, I noticed that we've got Miss Oakley's presentation on STAR results, and I would really like to hear about end of course test and the STAR, and also remediation and all that good stuff. So.
Yeah, that was,
Cecilia was here last
Yes.
month.
Last
meeting.
yeah. We started off with the kind of the academic performance and where we came from, and it's, Mike, you should have received an agenda from last year, from last month, did you not?
Yeah, I did.
Okay,
I did.
it's, if you look at that agenda, you will see the accountability testing of the students last year.
But generally, I think Louisa.
I'll submit a question to Louisa and follow that back up. I'm more interested in seeing what our responsibilities and cost of remediation are going to be, and how some of these other.
So are we.
Well, I know. Yeah, we talked about it last year, but
I mean, that's going to be a real problem in June. We don't really know what to expect.
All right.
I have one last question. The elementary total, do we have any indication why there's such a drop?
Yeah, what happened was
Does it
that,
that doesn't include pre-K, right? The
Sixth graders.
does, but the elementary drop was because sixth grade moved from elementary to the middle school. So you can see that the middle school red line dropped down, but the middle school line popped up. And so that was the shift from sixth grade.
still seems.
That happens every year.
Yeah.
They started it last year.
We moved them physically out of, we don't have any.
Oh, that how
we
you
have
counted them?
PK5 in all of our elementary schools, I believe all of them. There may be one or two. So we moved several, I mean, maybe 8, 10.
So there were some
sixth grade
campuses that
into
were,
the new middle schools that opened this year.
but they had been pre-K 6 before? Okay, because we made that big shift like 7 years ago.
So we started the shift about 7 years ago, and we just finished.
So now it's finished. Got it.
How many new charter schools opened in Dallas? Do you have any idea? No idea.
TA, if you go to TA website, now the number of charter schools statewide is capped at, I believe, 250. So, and last I knew that count was about 220. So I don't think there could have been that many more. Now, what may have happened is a charter school may have expanded out and opened other branches, but I think the actual charter numbers probably did not grow very much from one year to the next.
Except for Dion.
I wasn't going to bring it up.
Didn't the KIPP Academy open in South Dallas?
Yeah, but I think I don't know how those get counted.
That's so weird.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
All right. Thank you.
Well,
So we having a December meeting or no?
My understanding is when there's a community input,